So many people believe that their gut is broken, that they're intolerant, sensitive, or damaged forever. Today, we're going to change that idea because most guts aren't broken. They're just overwhelmed. So let's dive in. Hey, Dr. Popkin, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Let's start off with identifying what gut health is and perhaps what are the most common complaints that people have when they feel that their gut is broken.
Well, first of all, I want to welcome the listeners to the podcast today. In this episode, I will discuss some very common complaints I get from my patients on a pretty much daily basis regarding their gut health. And many people believe their gut is broken, but most are really experiencing what's called functional dysregulation. It's not permanent damage. It can be fixed. Gut health is not just about digestion. It's about so much more. It's about immune signaling, hormone balance, nervous system regulation, and metabolic stability. And in today's episode, we'll explain why some symptoms happen, why they often worsen under stress, and how healing actually occurs. So first, let me define what gut health is. A healthy gut has efficient digestion and absorption. It has a balanced gut microbiome, appropriate motility, meaning it's not too fast, it's not too slow. I'm talking about the food transit time, of course. A healthy intestinal barrier with proper permeability, meaning it wants the intestines will let the good stuff in and keep the bad stuff out. And proper gut-brain communication. It's really important to note that 70 to 80% of the brain's neurotransmitters are either made or manipulated in the gut. So it's vitally important to the brain that the gut is healthy. So we'll talk more about this later in this episode and in future episodes as well. So some common complaints that people often tell me about are bloating, very common, especially after eating what's so-called healthy foods. Constipation, diarrhea, or both. Some people alternate between diarrhea and constipation, which is quite troubling. Gas, reflux, nausea, food sensitivities that seem to multiply with different foods, fatigue after eating, brain fog, anxiety, mood changes, inflammatory symptoms like skin rashes or even joint pain. So to be clear, these are signals of dysregulation, not necessarily evidence that the gut is permanently damaged. The gut is just overwhelmed in many ways, and it can be fixed.
Okay, and I'm very familiar with this. I feel like I dealt with some stress gut issues that we're going to unpack a little bit later last year. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So, what does it mean when people say that their gut feels overwhelmed?
Well, what's really happening is you're getting an impaired digestive capacity due to lowered stomach acid, lower enzyme production, decreased bile production. There's altered gut motility with food either lingering too long in the stomach or moving too fast through the GI tract, both of which can cause symptoms that we'll talk about. Food lingering too long causes what's called dysbiosis, leading to fermentation instead of digestion of the food. Fermentation is not what you want going on inside of your stomach. You want to start the digestion process so that the food can actually be absorbed into your system. Or food is moving through too fast, which causes malabsorption issues and diarrhea, essentially making your food useless from a nutritional standpoint. There's also heightened visceral sensitivity from nervous system activation, which amplifies all of your symptoms. And if you notice, I didn't mention foods at all as causing the problem, but instead your potential gut issues. This is in contrast to my previous episode 7, which talked about eating clean and eating better food sources to help eliminate gastrointestinal symptoms. In this episode, we're going to talk about the other mechanism that's causing your symptoms, and it's your gut health. So the key point here is that food isn't always the problem. The system processing the food can be the problem even when you eat clean foods. That's why elimination diets don't always solve the problem, and in some cases, they can be problematic. Again, refer back to episode 7 for more details on how to eat clean and properly utilize elimination diets. There are multiple gastrointestinal stressors which are the problem, which we're going to discuss further in this podcast.
So, what I'm hearing you say that it's not just food that can impact gut health, like we talked about last time, even though that's a very important piece of the puzzle, but it's actually the system itself which can become dysregulated from a variety of other issues, like, for example, chronic stress.
Correct. So we discussed this at length in episode 7, and I'm going to highlight some important considerations here. I'll start with the physiology of stress and digestion. So there's something called sympathetic dominance, which is your fight or flight response during stress. And what this does is this shuts down stomach acid production, it decreases enzyme secretion, and it alters your gut motility and the coordination of your gut as the food moves through. Stress also reduces blood flow to the gastrointestinal tract, and stress increases cortisol, which alters immune signaling in the gut. And the long-term effects can include slower digestion, increased bloating and constipation, worsening food tolerance, and microbiome shifts towards less diversity. And all of these issues are what's causing multiple system problems in your body. So less stomach acid and less digestive enzymes, along with an altered gut motility and decreased gastrointestinal blood flow, leads to malabsorption and therefore low energy, brain fog, and weight issues. Now, the increased cortisol leads to altered immune signaling in the gut, which damages the gut's protective lining, and it leads to what's called leaky gut syndrome, which allows inflammatory compounds, which would otherwise be eliminated in the stool, to now enter the body and cause systemic or whole body inflammation that is manifest in multiple ways, like skin rashes, joint pain, brain fog, fatigue, and many other symptoms.
Yes, like I was saying, that's kind of all the things I dealt with earlier this year from chronic stress. So I will be a firsthand testament to that. And I was eating relatively healthy, maybe not as clean as we were talking about in our last episode, but it actually did push me into a much cleaner diet.
Stress is a very real thing, and you can clean up your diet, but if you've got a lot of stress in your life, the factory doesn't work well to process that clean food.
So let me ask you now, why do gut symptoms often start after stressful periods? Even if your diet hasn't changed, what's the disconnect, or rather the connect?
Well, that's the whole concept of this podcast. Your diet can be clean, as described in episode 7, but your gut can still be affected by stress in many different ways. And the key explanation here is that stress changes the terrain of your gut, which is manifested as increased gut permeability, an altered microbiome, and nervous system hypersensitivity. And an important point here is that diet is often blamed because the symptoms show up when you eat food, but stress has already lowered the gut's resilience first, which then leads to the symptoms. So the clinical pearl is that many food intolerances are actually stress-induced digestive intolerance. It's not the food at all that's causing the problem. So this highlights the importance of fixing both aspects of the problem. The first is cleaning up the fuel or the food source, and the second is improving the processing factory, which is your gut. These two parts of the equation are your food quality and your gut health.
Last time we talked about elimination diets and removing things from our meals because they can potentially help or not trigger our systems, right? But in some cases, it seems that they can make it worse, make our gut function worse rather than heal it. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. A lot of people think that it's the food that's the problem. So if they eliminate it, they're going to eliminate their problems. And, this is one of the most common things I see in patients struggling with gut symptoms is that the solution that they've been told is to follow more restriction, cut out this, eliminate that, narrow the diet further until only a handful of foods feel safe to them. And while elimination diets can be helpful in the short term as diagnostic tools, they can often backfire when they're used as long-term gut healing strategies. And here's why. First, prolonged elimination diets, they reduce what's called microbial diversity. Your gut microbiome thrives on variety, different fibers, different polyphenols, different carbohydrates. And when the diet becomes overly narrow and restricted, beneficial bacteria lose their fuel sources. So over time, this actually makes the gut more fragile and less adaptable, not more resilient. Secondly, the restriction often leads to micronutrient deficiencies, which makes sense, right? Many elimination diets unintentionally lower the intake of zinc and magnesium, B vitamins, iron, nutrients that are essential for your gut barrier integrity, immune signaling, proper motility. And I've seen patients eating extremely clean diets who are technically undernourished, inflamed, and losing lean muscle in the process. And muscle loss is not a sign of healing. It's a sign that the body is under stress. And third, restrictive diets reduce digestive adaptability. See, the gut is designed to handle variety. And when foods are avoided for long periods of time, the digestive system downregulates its ability to actually process them. Then when those foods are reintroduced, the symptoms flare, not necessarily because the food is harmful, but because the system hasn't been supported. And finally, there's the nervous system component, which is extremely important to understand here. When eating becomes fear-based, every meal feels like it's a test. The body shifts into a stress response before digestion even begins. So before you even eat anything, you're already stressed about the foods possibly causing an issue. cortisol rises, stomach acid drops, the motility slows, and symptoms become more likely. And in that state, even perfect foods can cause discomfort. And this is why clean eating, when done correctly, should actually expand nourishment, not shrink it. So, clean eating means choosing whole, minimally processed foods that support digestion, support blood sugar stability, and lean muscle, not constantly removing foods out of fear. So, again, please refer back to episode 7 for practical tips and solutions on how to create your clean eating diet program, and understand that in true gut healing, elimination is never the end goal. We want to have that variety, and we want to find out, is it the food that's causing the problem, or is it the gut that's processing the food? So the goal is restoration, right? We want to rebuild the digestive capacity. We want to rebuild microbial diversity. We want metabolic stability and confidence with food. And when the system becomes stronger, then tolerance improves naturally. The diet becomes more flexible. It's not more restrictive. So episode 7 focused on the fuel with clean eating foods. This episode is focusing on the factory and your gut's health. So it's two different things. Look at it as the fuel and the factory processing the fuel. And both of these things have to be functioning properly. So both of these episodes should actually allow you to fully understand what foods your body needs and how your gut works to process these foods into clean energy that'll help you thrive. So this is what I hope to accomplish here.
Kind of like the gas that goes into a car a little bit, right? We can put all the gas in there, but if the engine is broken or something, I don't know. I'm not a car girl, but
That's exactly it. If you're putting bad fuel into an engine that's good, you can have a problem. Yeah, exactly right.
so how are gut motility, how the food is moving, and intestinal permeability affected by both stress and unhealthy eating? What happens?
So once the body has been under stress for a prolonged period of time, whether that stress is emotional or metabolic or coming from chronic underfueling, the gut begins to lose its normal rhythm. And two of the most important functions here that are affected are motility and intestinal permeability. So I'll explain both of these in detail. The first part of the equation is motility, which is simply the coordinated movement of food through the digestive tract. And in a healthy system, the movement should be smooth, predictable, and well timed. But under chronic stress, that coordination starts to break down. Some people experience slowed motility, which leads to bloating and constipation and a feeling that food just sits there. And it actually is. It's fermenting in some cases, which is leading to the symptoms, especially bloating. And others will experience reactive motility with urgency and loose stools or cramping. And many people can actually fluctuate between the two. So diarrhea, constipation, slow motility, fast motility, and that can be quite problematic for a lot of people. And this happens because stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, they disrupt the normal signaling between the brain and the gut. So blood flow is redirected away from digestion, enzyme production is suppressed, and the gut loses its ability to move food through the system efficiently. So irregular meal timing, skipping meals, highly processed or inconsistent eating patterns, they further destabilize this rhythm. Now, the second part of the equation is that stress and unhealthy eating patterns affect intestinal permeability, which is often referred to as the gut barrier. The gut is designed to absorb the nutrients and to keep the toxins out of our body. And the lining of the intestine is meant to be selectively permeable. It allows nutrients to pass through while keeping irritants out. But chronic stress, elevated cortisol, poor sleep, blood sugar instability, alcohol, and ultra-processed foods, everything I talked about in previous episodes, these can all loosen what's called the tight junctions in that barrier. So the connections between the cells become weak, so the irritants can slip through this barrier and get into our system. And when permeability increases, now our immune system is exposed to particles that it shouldn't normally see, which now triggers inflammation, it heightens food reactivity, it amplifies the gut-brain signaling. So symptoms like bloating, pain, fatigue, brain fog, skin or joint issues often come out, not because the gut is permanently damaged, but because it's operating in a constantly threatened state. It's in a constant state of stress. So what's important to understand here is that motility and permeability are not fixed problems. They're responsive systems. They can be adapted to the environment. So when stress is reduced, meals become consistent and adequately fueled, blood sugar stabilizes, the nervous system shifts out of this fight or flight response. These functions often begin to normalize on their own. And this is why gut healing isn't about forcing the gut to behave with aggressive protocols, aggressive elimination diets. That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. It's about restoring rhythm, safety, and consistency. And when the body feels supported rather than stressed, the gut regains its ability to move food through the system properly. It protects the barrier and it tolerates a much wider range of foods again.
You mentioned that when the food stays in the gut for too long, it can ferment, right? And I think a lot of your listeners, something that you've also educated on and something you even recommend to your patients are the GLP-1 medications. Is there a difference there? Isn't the food staying in the stomach longer there? Is that done in a healthier way?
Yeah, that's interesting because, we're trying to get the food transit time to be coordinated properly. So what the GLP-1 medications do, one of the mechanisms is that it delays gastric emptying. It actually keeps food in the stomach longer. And what that does is that allows the food to not be digested as quickly and therefore not be forced through the system too quickly and cause insulin spikes, which then causes weight gain. It's a delicate balance, and that's where the dosing of the GLP-1 medications come in. If you give too much, the food can literally sit in your stomach for days and ferment and cause just horrible smelling burps, for lack of a better term, and bloating and other symptoms. So yeah, these medications have to be very carefully dosed. I believe episode 2 of the podcast talks about the GLP-1 medications. It's important with your dosing to make sure that you're slowing the transit down so that the food doesn't cause this insulin spike. But you don't want to slow it down too much that it's just going to ferment in your stomach and not give you any type of nutritional value out of it.
So, what I'm hearing you say that towing that line and that balance is really important between slowing it down, but not slowing it down too much. But let's switch gears and talk about how blood sugar instability can potentially affect gut symptoms.
So another major piece of gut dysfunction that almost no one talks about is blood sugar stability. And this is where a lot of people get confused because they're eating what they think is a clean diet, but they're unknowingly creating large blood sugar swings that directly irritate the gut. And there are many mechanisms at play here. The first to consider is that hypoglycemia triggers stress hormones. And when blood sugar rises too quickly, then drops into hypoglycemia, or what's called low blood sugar ranges, the body interprets that as a threat. So in response, it releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And once those hormones come online here, digestion immediately becomes a lower priority. And then cortisol and adrenaline alter gut physiology. So cortisol and adrenaline reduce blood flow to the digestive tract, suppress stomach acid, suppress digestive enzyme production, and disrupt the normal rhythm and gut motility. So that means food isn't being broken down or moved through the system efficiently, even if the food itself is high quality. So blood sugar swings worsen other symptoms like bloating, reflux, anxiety-driven gastrointestinal symptoms, which I will describe in detail here. So as I said, bloating is worsened by blood sugar swings. So when blood sugar crashes, gut motility slows, food sits in the stomach and intestines longer than it should, allowing it to ferment instead of digest. So that fermentation produces excess gas, leading to bloating, pressure, and discomfort. At the same time, stress hormones impair carbohydrate digestion and increase visceral sensitivity, so even normal amounts of gas feel painful or overwhelming. So what increased visceral sensitivity means is that things that ordinarily wouldn't bother you, now they're bothering you because you're under a stress response. As I said, also, reflux is worsened by blood sugar swings. And because reflux is very closely tied to blood sugar instability. Cortisol reduces the tone in the lower esophageal sphincter, which is the valve that separates the esophagus or the food tube, so to speak, that then leads into the stomach. So it makes it easier for stomach contents to be refluxed upward into the esophagus where it's not supposed to be. Delayed stomach emptying increases pressure in the abdomen, which further promotes reflux. More pressure in the belly forces the food and the contents back up into your esophagus. And paradoxically, the stress suppresses stomach acid production, which actually worsens the reflux by slowing digestion and impairing gastric clearance. So even though there's less acid, you're getting more reflux back into the esophagus. And the esophagus does not like having food come from the stomach backwards through that lower esophageal sphincter back into the esophagus. It causes symptoms of reflux and heartburn, and in some cases, chest pain and discomfort. Irregular meal timing is something that happens when blood sugar is unstable. It adds another layer of disruption to this system. And another one of the symptoms we'll talk about is the anxiety-driven gastrointestinal symptoms, which are also worsened by blood sugar swings. So, blood sugar crashes also play a major role in these anxiety driven gastrointestinal symptoms. So, when glucose drops, the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight mechanism, is activated. And this increases gut brain signaling and heightens awareness of sensations like nausea, cramping, urgency, or discomfort. This is sometimes people refer to that as they feel, butterflies in their stomach or their stomach feels unsettled. And over time, the brain begins to associate eating with stress or danger, and it creates a feedback loop where meals themselves actually trigger anxiety and these gastrointestinal symptoms, even in the absence of structural gut disease. So, as you can see, this heightened sensitivity really can be problematic. So, why does this matter clinically? Well, this is why so many people blame specific foods when the real issue is the metabolic response to eating, aka the factory or your gut health. And in many cases, simply stabilizing blood sugar by eating balanced meals, spacing meals appropriately, and avoiding extreme restriction can significantly reduce bloating, reflux, and anxiety driven gut symptoms before any advanced gut protocol is ever needed. And to go back to your point, the GLP-1 medications, if dosed properly, will actually stabilize the blood sugar and will reduce that stress because in a lot of these people, the food is moving through the system too fast. It's causing that insulin spike and it's causing this dysregulation. So when dosed properly, the GLP-1 medications are actually helping slow the system down appropriately. And the key takeaway here is this. So a reactive gut is a metabolically stressed gut. When blood sugar is unstable, the body shifts into survival mode and digestion suffers as a result.
So again, all about that balance. So, what are some common mistakes that people make when trying to heal their gut? I know I kind of tried to be my own self-educated expert and actually try to learn from probably what we're doing right now from doctors online, but there's probably a rhyme and a rhythm to that I could have been missing that can perhaps delay or postpone results.
Yeah, this is again, we talk about DIYing your healthcare, right? Do it yourself.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Well, after after working through stress, blood sugar, motility, and permeability issues, this is usually the point where people say, "Okay, I'm ready to fix my gut. I'm ready to fix my diet. What should I take?" And this is where a lot of well-intentioned people accidentally slow their own healing. And the first and most common mistake is doing too much too fast. Right? Many patients start by stacking supplements. They take probiotics, antimicrobials, binders, enzymes without a clear strategy or timeline. So instead of calming the gut, this often increases irritation and keeps the body in a heightened state of vigilance. Again, you're stressing the gut, which causes all the issues we talked about earlier. More intervention does not automatically mean more healing. The second mistake is over restriction disguised as clean eating. So people cut out gluten, dairy, grains, sugar, fruit, sometimes all at once. And while the symptoms may temporarily improve, the underlying gastrointestinal symptoms, they don't get stronger. You remove that variety that the gut needs in order to be healthy. And over time, the microbial diversity drops, micronutrient intake declines, blood sugar becomes unstable, and lean muscle mass often starts to erode. So a body that is losing muscle is not healing, it's compensating. And then again, we're going to go back to the GLP-1 medications again. So many people are on it. And what happens is if they're not getting adequate calories and adequate protein, they're going to lose muscle called sarcopenia. Again, dosing is very important in these medications, but also having the proper diet and exercise, having a full system around the medication is important. It's not just the medication itself. Another mistake is ignoring sleep. We talked about this in a previous podcast episode on sleep and stress. Sleep is when gut repair happens. And again, we talked about this at length in episode 5. You can go back and listen to that. Poor sleep keeps cortisol elevated. It worsens inflammation. It impairs glucose regulation, and it prevents the nervous system from shifting into a restorative state. So no diet or supplement can override chronic sleep deprivation. And I'm going to say this again. It's vitally important to understand no diet or supplement can override chronic sleep deprivation. You must take care of yourself by getting proper sleep. So closely related is understanding the impact of stress. So many people intellectually understand that stress affects digestion, but they still try to heal their gut without addressing their workload issues, emotional stress, or mental hypervigilance around food. So if the nervous system remains on high alert, digestion will remain compromised. Exercise is another area where people overshoot. Overtraining, right? Especially in the context of undereating, is a very powerful stressor on the gut. Intense exercise without adequate fuel raises cortisol, worsens permeability, and destabilizes blood sugar. So you hear the common theme here, which is cortisol, and cortisol is your stress hormone. And in some cases, we need cortisol to give us that fight or flight response when it's necessary. But when we're stuck in this chronic stressful state with chronic cortisol elevations, that's when the problems really begin. So on the other hand, avoiding movement altogether by not exercising can slow motility and impair metabolic health. So the goal is supportive, strength preserving movement, not exhaustion, meaning you want to exercise, but you don't want to over exercise because you're actually stressing yourself. And finally, one of the most overlooked mistakes is chasing symptoms instead of restoring systems. So what do we mean here? Bloating, reflux, and discomfort, they're signals, but focusing solely on eliminating the symptoms without rebuilding digestion, metabolic stability, and nervous system regulation often leads to short-term relief, but long-term frustration. So true gut healing is not about micromanaging every little reaction that you have. It's about creating an internal environment where the gut can actually function normally again. So when nourishment is adequate and meals are consistent, muscle is supported, sleep improves, stress is addressed, symptoms often begin to quiet down, sometimes without directly targeting them at all. So this is where the Popkin method can help by working with you and your primary care physician to create a gut health program that integrates proper foods as fuel, as described in episode 7, and improving the function of the factory, aka your gut health, as described here in this podcast episode.
So, a lot of factors to take in and consider and be aware of. But the Popkin method specifically, what does a true medical based gut healing program look like? I'm sure there's steps and an order to things. So, how does that look like for you, doctor?
So this is where I'll give you some practical tools to fix your overstressed gut. One of the most overlooked but critical components of gut healing is addressing nervous system dysregulation. So you can eat perfectly, take the right supplements, follow every protocol, but if the nervous system is stuck in a chronic stressful state, the gut will not fully heal. So let's define what nervous system dysregulation actually means before we discuss how to heal the gut. So, nervous system dysregulation occurs when the body spends too much time in a sympathetic or fight or flight state and not enough time in the parasympathetic or rest and digest state. So, in this state, the body constantly perceives threat, and even if nothing is actually wrong. So, when the nervous system is dysregulated, digestion is suppressed, gut motility becomes erratic, intestinal permeability increases, inflammation is amplified, food tolerance decreases, and the gut-brain feedback loop becomes hypersensitive. In other words, the gut's being asked to digest in a body that doesn't feel safe enough to do so. So a true medical-based gut healing program recognizes that nervous system regulation is not optional, it's foundational. And the goal here isn't to relax more, but to consistently send the body signals of safety. So here's what this looks like in a patient-friendly, realistic way. So first, we focus on predictability and rhythm. The nervous system thrives on consistency, eating regular meals, waking and sleeping at similar times, avoiding long periods of fasting, help reduce this perceived threat and stabilize gut function. Remember, our body has a circadian rhythm, and when you take it out of that rhythm, the body does not thrive. Second, we want to address blood sugar stability, which is another common theme you're going to hear me talking about, because metabolic stress is one of the fastest ways to activate the stress response. Eating balanced meals with adequate protein, adequate carbohydrates, and healthy fats help prevent those cortisol spikes that worsen gut symptoms and nervous system reactivity. So it's pretty simple if you have a balanced diet. Third, we prioritize sleep quality. Again, we're going to talk about sleep, and it's sleep quality, not just sleep duration. So poor sleep keeps cortisol elevated. It prevents that parasympathetic rest and digest recovery period. Even improving bedtime routines like light exposure, sleep timing can significantly calm gut symptoms. You can go back to previous episodes that we talked about sleep and stress. Fourth, we use gentle, non-stimulating movement. So what does this mean? While intense exercises can worsen dysregulation, activities like walking, Light strength training, yoga, mobility work, stretching all improve vagal tone and support gut motility without overstimulating the stress response. Fifth, we incorporate simple breathing and vagal nerve practices. This doesn't need to be complicated. Slow nasal breathing, extended exhales, or brief mindfulness practices before meals can help shift the body into a rest and digest state, improving digestion in real time. Meaning you want to calm down before you eat. You don't want to be excited and be in that fight or flight mode when you're eating. You want to be in the rest and digest mode. Sixth, we reduce dietary and lifestyle extremes. So over restriction, constant food monitoring, excessive supplements, or aggressive protocols all keep the nervous system on heightened alert. Healing requires creating a sense of safety, not control. Finally, we gradually rebuild confidence with food symptoms. So as the nervous system calms, the gut becomes more tolerant. Symptoms may not disappear immediately, but reactions become less intense, less frequent, and easier to recover from, signs that regulation is improving. So the key message here is this: gut healing doesn't begin in the gut alone. It begins when the nervous system learns that the environment is safe enough to digest, absorb, and repair.
Yes, so it's really our mental and emotional state impacts the physical state and the digestion. It's really all connected. And it seems that more often than not, from what I'm hearing you say, is that's usually where it starts. It's not the food we put in, it's actually the environment and the state that our nervous system is stationed in that can throw everything off.
Yeah, it's the gut-brain connection. It's the food going in, but also the factory processing the food. Both of those things are vitally important.
After we follow the right steps, or perhaps make an appointment with you and get some answers, what are some signs that the gut is healing that could perhaps encourage us or make us feel better about the steps that we're taking, even if the symptoms aren't completely gone yet? But what are some little glimmers of positive forward motion?
Well, this is one of the most important parts of the conversation because many people quit too early. They assume that if symptoms aren't completely gone, healing isn't happening. But in real physiology, recovery shows up as improved regulation before it shows up as perfect digestion. So again, progress over perfection. One of the earliest signs of gut healing is that symptoms become less intense and less disruptive. You may still experience bloating or discomfort, but it resolves more quickly. And it doesn't hijack your entire day. It doesn't ruin your entire meal. Your recovery time improves, and that's a meaningful marker of healing. Another sign is improved food tolerance. Foods that once felt completely off limits may start to cause milder reactions or no reaction at all. This doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean you force foods back in aggressively, but it does mean the system is becoming more adaptable. You may notice more regular bowel movements. They don't have to be perfect, but they become more predictable and less reactive. That consistency reflects improved motility and nervous system regulation. A really important but overlooked sign is less fear around eating. When the nervous system calms down, meals feel safer. You're less hyper-focused on every sensation, and eating becomes more neutral and hopefully enjoyable again. That shift alone improves digestion further by decreasing that stress response we talked about. Energy is another key signal, right? Many people notice better energy between meals, fewer blood sugar crashes, improved exercise tolerance, decreased cravings for certain foods. When the body is nourished and metabolically stable, it has the resources to repair the gut instead of constantly reacting. Sleep and stress resilience often improve as well. You may not feel relaxed, but you may recover from stress more quickly. Your body doesn't stay stuck in that fight or flight mode, and digestion benefits from that shift. And finally, one of the most important markers in a clean eating and gut healing framework is lean muscle preservation, or actually regaining lean muscle mass. When muscle mass stabilizes, it tells us the body is no longer in a catabolic, stress-driven state. Muscle supports blood sugar regulation, it lowers inflammation, improves gut resilience. So muscle is truly your longevity reservoir. You want to protect muscle at all costs. Healing does not occur in a body that is breaking itself down. We don't want to break down muscle tissue. So again, with the GLP-1 medications, you want to make sure the dosage is not too high, you're getting adequate protein intake, and you're exercising those muscles so that they can grow. So if you're seeing these changes, even if some symptoms are still present, that's not failure, that's progress. So gut healing is not linear. There'll be ups and downs, but when the trend is towards better tolerance, more stability, improved energy, and less fear, the body is moving in the right direction. Again, like I said before, progress over perfection. So the goal isn't a perfect gut. The goal is a resilient gut, one that can adapt, recover, and support a strong, well-nourished body. So if you'd like additional support, you can message me through the Popkin Method website or any of my social media platforms, and I'll send you a patient-friendly what to stop doing first checklist to improve your gastrointestinal symptoms. It's written in clear, supportive language that aligns with my physician-led approach to clean eating, gut health restoration, fat loss, and lean muscle support. So you can start making changes that help your body heal rather than feel more restricted.
Thanks, Dr. Popkin. So informative as always. Your gut doesn't need to be punished or restricted into submission. It just needs support, rhythm, and capacity. And that's the Popkin method, understanding the system before changing the inputs. Our hope is that this two-part series on gastrointestinal health helps you better understand your symptoms and feel more confident in creating a program that truly works for you. In our last episode, episode 7, we focused on the fuel, the foods you're eating, and how certain food choices or patterns can contribute to digestive symptoms. And in this episode, we shifted the focus to the factory, the gut itself, and how digestion, stress, metabolism, and gut function determine how clean food is processed into usable energy. Together, these episodes are meant to remind you that healing isn't just about what you eat, but how your body is able to receive, process, and use that food. When both the fuel and the factory are supported, symptoms often improve and health becomes more sustainable. And if you're ready to explore these therapies the right way, visit thepopkinmethod.com to learn more and schedule an online discovery call or an in-person visit with Dr. Popkin today. This is the Popkin Method, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.